Today, we're going to talk about Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind and the new documentary entitled Under the Red Sky. My name is Mike Stibbs, and this is Detox Babylon. Thank you very much for tuning in to Detox Babylon. My name is Mike Stibbs. It is so good to be here with you today. We're going to be talking about the new documentary entitled Under the Red Sky. In fact, let's play a quick clip.
What exactly is communism? Communism is a political theory derived from Karl Marx, advocating class war, and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. Communism, whose ultimate goal is a socio-economic order, structured upon the ideas of common ownership, and the absence of social classes, money, and the state. Communism starts by instituting a revolution, in which the working class would take power and establish social ownership of the means of production. Along with social democracy, communism became the dominant political tendency within the international socialist movement by the 1920s. Social democracy originated as an ideology with the labor and socialist movement. Their goal is a social revolution, to move away from capitalism to a post-capitalist economy such as socialism. Perhaps history tells the best example of a socialist, Marxist, revolution. In 1893 Vladimir Lenin became a senior Marxist activist. In 1897 he was arrested for sedition, and exiled. After his exile, he moved to Western Europe where he became a prominent theorist in the Marxist, Russian Social Democratic Labour Party. In 1903, Lenin split from the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party for ideological differences, and started the Bolshevik faction. The October Revolution, also known as the Bolshevik coup, was a revolution in Russia led by Vladimir Lenin. The revolution was the catalyst to the larger Russian Revolution that took place between 1917 through 1923. There was an armed insurrection in Petrograd, now St. Petersburg. It was the precipitating event of the Russian Civil War. Vladimir Lenin's Bolshevik government initially shared power with the left socialist revolutionaries. Although by 1918, they had centralized power in the new Communist Party. All opponents were suppressed, in the Red Terror, a violent campaign administered by the state security services. Tens of thousands were either killed, or put in concentration camps. Lenin is perhaps one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. He is a controversial historical figure to say the least. Supporters view him as a champion of socialism, and the working class, while his critics highlight the fact that he was actually an authoritarian leader, responsible for political repression, and mass killings. Hitler's story is very similar. He influenced the working class, and started the Nazi Party, which meant National Socialism. We all know how that story ended. Communism starts by a working class revolution, then they overthrow the capitalist government. Then they kill or suppress anyone who is against their, quote, unquote, utopian society.
So no doubt we've seen in the past 4 years here, we've seen this fight between American capitalism and this agenda of communism, and how it's really not even creeping into our society anymore. It's really becoming a takeover, to say the least. But that's what we're really outlining in it. It's not only about communism. There's a lot of other things in there as well. I don't want to give too much away, but go to dailyrenegade.com and check it out. And episode number 2 is going to come out in late March, and that is going to be outlining technology, artificial intelligence, transhumanism. In fact, I made a trailer for that. Let's roll that real quick.
Artificial intelligence is already scary enough. There's already things that computers can do today that they couldn't do 5-10 years ago, and it's radically changing the world. But what's really frightening is what's called artificial consciousness. See, we understand intelligence. Scientists do not understand consciousness. What is consciousness? That is a big question in the scientific community today. One such theory is that consciousness is an interaction between particles and what's called a quantum field. There might be a quantum field called the cortical field, and consciousness might be an interaction between particles in our brain called corticons and this cortical field, and that interaction is consciousness. Could you actually create an artificial consciousness, a type of physical consciousness that's not human, it's not animal, it's not anything really, it's artificial, but still there's some kind of spirit in there? And if that is possible, could that explain the image of the beast? Because in the book of Revelation, it says that the image of the beast has life. Could this be a type of artificial life that when you see it from the outside, it seems real, it seems just like us, but really it's an artificial interaction with the cortical field?
So communism and artificial intelligence and technology, they definitely converge. And I believe that that's the variable of why communism hasn't really worked effectively in a society until we see like China. But what's effective? I mean, suppressing the people is not a good thing. But we look at China and they have something called the social credit system. It's a reward and punishment based system. For example, let's say you jaywalk or you play music too loud or you don't sort your garbage correctly, like into recyclables and whatnot, is that you will be deducted social credit points. And then on the other side is if you do something good, then they'll reward you. So they're not only trying to contain their people, they're trying to change how they think. They're trying to condition them into being compliant citizens. And basically what they'll do is if your social credit score gets so low, then they'll start taking away some of your rights. And it's an AI-based surveillance system. Very, very interesting. So we go into that in episode 2. But really what I want to talk about today is kind of the foundation to where this whole documentary is going to end. And it's going to end with the Great Deception. And I believe that these 3 elements play a part, and they're all woven together to create the end time scenario. And that's the political agenda, and then stacking on top of that, the technology and the artificial intelligence. And then last but not least, the Great Deception, which a lot of us are theorizing and submitting to you, and I'm one of them, that it will have to do with this alien agenda. So I want to look at Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind and then kind of give you a little bit of a teaser into what some of that's going to be about in episode 3. So we're going to go in and we'll first outline the different types of close encounters. Let's see here. So this is based on Hynek's scale. He basically came up with a 3-parter here, and then we've extended that in our day and age. But a close encounter of the first kind is basically just seeing an unidentified flying object in the sky. The close encounters of the second type are a UFO event in which physical evidence is alleged. Now, this can be interference in the functioning of a vehicle or electronic device, animals reacting, or a physiological effect such as paralysis or heat and discomfort in the witness, or some physical trace like impressions in the ground, scorched or otherwise affected vegetation, or a chemical trace. Now, close encounters of the third kind are UFO encounters in which an animated entity is present. These include humanoids, robots, and humans who seem to be occupants or pilots of the UFO. And then we've extended this. This is beyond Hynek's scale. And Dr. Alan Hynek, he was the guy that was involved in Project Blue Book, gave Steven Spielberg a lot of research for his movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So, a close encounter of the fourth kind is basically when you're abducted by these entities in the UFOs. And a close encounter of the fifth kind is a UFO event that involves direct communication between aliens and humans. This type of close encounter was named by ufologist Stephen M. Greer. And that's who we're going to talk about here next, is this gentleman, Stephen Greer. As I see a lot of interesting things with this guy. He came out with a documentary with the same title, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And there was in this documentary, he outlines the different narratives behind the UFOs that we're seeing. And one of the narratives is that they are a threat. And then he comes out and says that they're not a threat, in fact, because he has met with them and talked with them and actually acquired and was privy to their agenda. And he believes that they're benevolent and they want to come. They want to come here and they want to help people. They want to help humans elevate their consciousness and really take us into the next age of humanity and technology and all of this stuff. And he claims that he actually talked with them and has an idea of their agenda. So let's go further down this rabbit hole. So Mr. Stephen Greer, he was born in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1955. He claims to have seen an unidentified flying object at close range when he was about 8 years old, which inspired his interest in ufology. He was trained as a transcendental meditation teacher and served as a director of a meditation organization. Greer founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence in 1990 to create a diplomatic research-based initiative to contact extraterrestrial civilizations. The official statements regarding its intentions also include a new category of extraterrestrial encounters, namely CE-5 or Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. This was defined by Greer as human-initiated contact or communication with extraterrestrial life. Human-initiated contact with UFOs. So without giving too much away, Stephen Greer is saying that if you follow his protocol for initiating contact, aka a CE-5, Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind, is that you can actually get together with a group of people, get together and start to meditate, and that they'll show up and they'll even maybe even communicate with you. And one of the narratives out there is the fact that they can understand what you're thinking, that you can sit there and think to yourself, we'll come back, and then they'll come back, and all of this weird stuff. And so I actually come from the school of believing that this is actually happening. But the way that we're talking about, the way that they're talking about it is obviously a huge deception. Okay? I believe this plays into the end time agenda of the Great Deception. Okay? Now, can we prove this biblically? Well, maybe, and I'm going to show you why. Or I'm going to show you how. So I want to go into the book of Mark, chapter 13, and we're going to go through verse 24 through 27. But then in those days after the tribulation, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars of heaven will fall, and the powers in heaven will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send his angels and gather together his elect from the four winds, from the farthest part of the earth to the farthest part of heaven. So what I want to point out here in these verses, okay, and I believe that this talks about the final battle between the fallen angels and actually Jesus himself. You can call it a battle, but really it's not a battle. It's just Jesus taking his place. So he says, in those days after the tribulation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its lights. So obviously we're talking about celestial bodies right here. Then he says, the stars of heaven will fall and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Well, that's very interesting. Prior to this, he just talked about the sun and the moon. Now he's talking about the stars, right? So some people are saying that, meteorites will fall to the earth. The actual powers, the cosmic powers will actually lose their orbits and whatnot. But I'm actually here telling you that I don't believe that to be the case at all. And I'll tell you why. The stars of heaven will fall and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. Who's they? They is the stars of heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. So I believe that the stars are referring to the fallen angels and that they will fall from the dimension that they're in right now. I believe they already lost access to higher dimensions and they were cast down with Satan. But they still have access to higher dimensions now, just not as high as they could see before. They lost access to heaven, but they have access to higher dimensions. And I believe that Jesus will cut that access off and they will actually fall to earth. If we look at Psalms 82, it says that they will die like men. So I believe they'll be cast to the earth and they will actually die like men. But I see here that Jesus is talking about the fallen angels and the powers in the heavens will be shaken, that the power and authority that they have right now will be completely blown out. It'll be shaken. And then they will see, who is they? The fallen angels will see Jesus coming, the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And basically he'll dethrone those entities and Jesus will take his place. And then Jesus will send his angels to gather together his elect from the four winds of the farthest parts of the earth to the farthest parts of heaven. Now, a very interesting part here is if we look in the prior verse about the elect and about what's going to happen. He says, then if anyone asks, or if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or look, he is there, do not believe it. For false Christ and false prophets will rise and show signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. But take heed. You see, I've told you these things beforehand. So Jesus is already talking about false Christ. So Christ is anointed. So false anointed somethings, right? The stars of heaven. They will masquerade as messengers of light. And false prophets will proclaim that these entities are gods or are, I don't want to give too much away of what it's going to be about. But you see, Jesus then tells us, I told you these things. So you'll know beforehand, that you'll understand that this is going to happen before it happens. That all plays right in to the whole close encounters of the fifth kind agenda. They are calling on these stars of heaven to come to earth to teach us their ways so we can have ascended consciousness. This is nothing new. Aleister Crowley did it and had an encounter with Lamb. Helena Blavatsky did it and had an encounter with the Ascended Masters, aka the Mahatmas, that gave her the blueprints for the book, The Secret Doctrine. It's nothing new. It's the same thing being recycled again. In Hinduism, they have something called the Akashic realm. It's this realm that you could access through meditation that will actually tell you the truth of the universe. It's not the truth, though. It's only the truth missing the biggest part of it, okay? And you see, when we say that Jesus is the name above all names, so we can't say that too lightly, and I'll tell you why. It's because Paul says that there are many demons, there are many gods, little g gods, right? That have authority, that have power in the heavenly realms right now. They've been given power over this earth to deceive mankind. But Jesus is the name that is above those names, that no matter what truth they tell us, no matter what they try to deceive us into, Jesus is the name above every single name. He is the name and the power above every single power, above every single authority. And he is coming back to dethrone the fallen angels and shake their power in the heavens. And then he's going to gather together his elect, you and me, and from the four corners of the earth and from heaven, and will always be with him. It's the same story. It's the same thing playing out. My name is Mike Stibbs. Go forth and bear some fruit.